Posebej nas veseli, da se nam je na posvetovanju kot prvi referent pridružil gospod Giuseppe Vitiello. Gospod Vitiello je od leta 2019 direktor EBLIDE, predtem pa je deloval kot vodja enote, programski svetovalec in strokovnjak v različnih mednarodnih organizacijah, kot so Evropska komisija, Svet Evrope, Mednarodni center ISSN in druge. Predtem je deloval kot vodja oddelka za raziskave in razvoj v nacionalni knjižnici v Firencah ter predaval na univerzah v Orlinu in Toulouseu. Gostoval je tudi na Hochschule der Medien v Stuttgartu in univerzi v Benetkah. Je avtor 6 knjig in več kot 100 člankov z področja bibliotekarstva in informatike ter kulturne zgodovine. V današnji prezentaciji nam bo predstavil EBLIDA dokument o knjižničnih dejavnostih Evropske unije in njenega načrta za kulturo v letih 2023-2026. Ta knjižnična dejavnost je predmet obravnave na ministrstvih za kulturo članic Evropske unije. Kot smo slišali, je dokument tudi že bil preveden in je dostopen na spletni strani Zveze bibliotekarskih društev. Samo naj še povem, da bo predavanje v angleškem jeziku, na koncu pa bomo še namenili nekaj minut za razpravo. Tisti, ki spremljate naš dogodek preko spleta, ste vabljeni, da vaša vprašanja zapišete v klepet in bomo na njih odgovorili na koncu. Dear Mr. Vitiello, welcome to our professional event in Maribor. I have briefly introduced you and the content of your presentation today, and the word is yours.
Good morning. I have to apologize for 2 things. First, because I'm speaking English and I'm unable to speak Slovenian or a language which is similar to that. And the second, because I'm not so sure that I will be provocative, as Barbara suggested. I mean, the issue, what I'm going to present here is the Council of Europe recommendation on library legislation and policy in Europe. And I'm very happy to be here in Slovenia because it's thanks to a Slovenian person that this recommendation was promoted and approved at the end. I'm talking about, I'm making reference to Matthias Gruden. He will be a speaker tomorrow from Strasbourg. And he's the director of democratic participation at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. And he and of course his staff have been extremely helpful in providing input for the recommendation and also in accelerating the approval of the recommendation. So this is an official document which has been signed by the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is not the European Union. It's a different organization. It's based in Strasbourg, and there are 47 states, but on 5th April, this recommendation was approved by 47 ambassadors in Strasbourg. But I will also take the opportunity to present another initiative, which is another European document, this time not the Council of Europe, but the European Union. And it's the library action on the Council, on the resolution, on the EU Work Plan for Culture 23-26. So 2 separate documents, but we'll see they will they will meet sooner or later, and I will explain to you how. So talking about the recommendation, the recommendation has a long history because in 2000, EBLIDA already cooperated with the Council of Europe in issuing some guidelines on library legislation and policy in Europe. They were guidelines, so politically that has a lower status. And well, these guidelines were quite influential because they shaped up some library legislations in several European countries. There were 4 sections, and in the recommendation there are 5 sections. And you can ask why. Well, when we in EBLIDA, we set up the working group on library legislation, we were fully convinced that actually it was only a matter of makeup, you know, just an amendment there, a change there, an improvement there. But then when we started to work on the recommendation, we found out that we had to write the guidelines from scratch. And why? Because many, many things have happened. It's not only the technological changes Damiana was referring to. It's not only the fact that there are societal changes, that we have to face, but it's also the fact that there have been events in the last 5 years that have profoundly changed the world and, of course, have had an impact on the world of libraries. COVID, to begin with, which has totally shaped, in a way, how libraries work, and, of course, also the Ukrainian war. And I will explain to you how. First of all, let me say that in this, the other way. In this recommendation, libraries are defined as publicly accessible institutions of a cultural, educational, and social nature that serve local, academic, specialized communities and/or society at large. This is a little bit to describe the essence of library power. Why libraries are so powerful? Why libraries are the main cultural facility in a country. This is because they can work at the same time on the cultural, on the educational, and the social scenarios. There are 5 sections, as I was saying, and I would like at least to explain why there are these 5 sections and what has radically changed in the recommendation in relation to the guidelines. First, the first section is freedom of expression and free access to information, but the working group also added democratic participation. Why did we add that? Because freedom of expression, free access to information are empty concepts if they do not come together with active citizenships, people's interaction and dialogue. And then there is this new issue, which is the role of libraries to fight fake news, and also the role of libraries as democratic institutions. There are several legislation that have already taken this into account, and they preceded, let's say, the reflection of the working group that was set up within EBLIDA. Like, for instance, in Norway, if you look at the Norwegian Library Act, which was approved in 2013, on Article number 1, it says the public libraries shall be an independent meeting place and an arena for public discussion and debate. Why do libraries need legislation? Well, it's quite obvious, because normally public libraries are funded by municipalities, and we want to exclude the fact that every municipality goes its own ways when they approve local library provision. So a general framework is needed. And what is this general framework? And there is the other surprise, let's say, in this recommendation, the second section. If you look at the text of the guidelines in 2000 and the text of the recommendation in 2023, then you find that there are very little changes. There is the same emphasis on quality of services, on kind of governance, the range of financing sources. So where is the revolution in library work? The revolution is in this, that in 2000, libraries were working within the framework of national book and information policies. But now, in the recommendation approved by the Council of Europe, then libraries are working within the framework of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And why this? Because if libraries have to encompass the whole range of activities in a community, cultural, educational, and social changes, so they need a wider framework. And this framework is offered by the UN 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development, because this is the richest, the largest framework for libraries. So it fits better the work of libraries. There are other sections in the recommendation. I'm not going to expand on that. the third section, which was designed exactly because COVID was an unprecedented challenge. COVID has changed totally the work of libraries because the digital public library boomed during the COVID crisis, because libraries were also considered in their social aspects on how they can bring relief to population who were at that time segregated. So there is a need to reinforce library resilience. And of course, there is a need to manage new technologies, and in particular, artificial intelligence. And then the last section of the recommendation is about copyright, because it takes into account the 2019 directive of copyright, which was approved by the European Union. So this is the recommendation, but I also say that there is a link between the recommendation and the second instrument that I'm going to present. And this is a new instrument. It was approved only in November 22. It is the very first. I have a long experience in the library world, and I also worked for the Council of Europe. I also worked for the European Union, for the European Commission. And it's the first time after 23 years that I see again the word library in a title of an action of the European Commission, so of the European Union, not Commission. So it's a new thing. And I think that we should pay a lot of attention to this action because it's important. The title is, I mean, if you look at the paragraph, it's only 15 lines, that's it. And the title is Building Bridges, Strengthen the Multiple Roles of Libraries as Gateways to and Transmitters of Cultural Works, Skills, and European Values. So it's quite general. It also says that it works according to OMC. OMC stands for Open Method of Coordination. This is another, you know, in the acronym of the European Union, OMC is something new, which libraries were not used to. And there are general words about the libraries' role in building democracies. Libraries has access to pluralist, reliable information, indigenous data, libraries in rural areas. I mean, all this is very, very general. And actually, what it is about, the Ministry of Culture of every member state has to designate a representative. They will meet at least twice a year. So imagine that there are some 40 people that are sent by the ministry, normally the ministries of culture, but also municipalities or regions. It depends really from country to country. These countries will, these delegates will designate themselves some 8 to 10 experts who will write a report on libraries in Europe. Now, what does it happen when you write a report? Most of the report, let's be frank, they go to the cupboard and they stay there and they are forgotten, or perhaps to the national libraries and they are there in legal deposit for the future generations, yes? So the work that we have to do as librarians, the work that we have to do as EBLIDA, to the European Bureau of Library Information and Documentation Associations, which works with 32 member states in 32 states with and has 130 members. The work that we have to do is to give an impact, to provide a significance and to provide an impact to this report. And how are we doing this? EBLIDA issued a statement only 1 month ago, 2 months ago, and this is the kind of work we would like to do for the OMS group, for this group of 40 experts of the Council of European Union. We would like to provide measurements, indicators. I will give you an example. This is an indicator which concerns library spending, library expenditure in 12 countries, okay? So you look at the tables and you see Finland, Denmark, Sweden. The first are the usual suspects. It's always the same, the Nordic countries, Finland, Denmark, and you see Slovenia is probably on the third place. This is library expenditure divided by number of inhabitants, okay? Now let's go to the next slide. If we compare library expenditure in relation to the GDP of a country, because it's actually unfair to compare the library expenditure in Finland. You know that the GDP per capita in Finland is 45,000 euro per capita. And for instance, in Croatia, it is 15,000. So there is a difference of, it's 3 times lower. So now if you do it in relation to the GDP, this is actually the result. And you see that actually Slovenia is not so bad, not a bad position. But you also see that Croatia, actually, there is a great library expenditure in relation to the GDP of this country. Another possibility to look at library expenditure is also from the perspective of cultural expenditure. Imagine that you have a cultural expenditure. How much is spent by a country on libraries instead of museums, theaters, operas, and so on and so on? And this is, and this is the result. And you see that Slovenia, for instance, is not really in the worst place in this thing. That means that there is attention that is paid by governments to the development of libraries. So this is the kind of tools that we would like to do, to offer to the OMC experts. But there is something more, and this is extraordinarily important. You know that one of the outputs is possible funding lines under EU programs. And of course, when you think of EU programs, you always think of Erasmus, Creative Europe, Serve. These are, you know, the programs that sometimes are used by libraries. But there is a category of European Union funding, which is very, very little used by libraries, and which is actually the best opportunity for libraries. And these are the European Union structural and investment funds. When you think of structural funds, you think of the motorway, let's say, from Zagreb to Italy, or from the train line from Tallinn to Berlin. But this is these are, of course, structural funds, but a lot of structural funds, actually, some structural funds, an important part is also used to change the cultural infrastructure. And this may have an extraordinary impact for libraries. We have even launched an idea, because structural funds are by round, you know, every 7 years. You had 2014, 2020, 2021, 2027. So this is actually how structural funds work. We have launched the idea, and I really ask for your support or for your really encouragement, because it is a national negotiation. We have launched the idea to create a special action line in structural funds for libraries in the next provision, which covers 22-28 to 2028-2035. Okay, so it's the next round. And why this? Because negotiations will start in 2025, 2026, and so, but we have to prepare our tools so that this may work. And what is the model? The model is museums, actually. If you look at structural funds in most European countries, you will find a special line, which is culture and tourism. This is a line which is used by museums for their improvements, for their enhancement in construction, okay? And why this? So that they are promoted and they encourage tourism. Think that only in 7 years, from 2014 to 2021, in Italy only, there were almost 13 billion euros that were spent for 21,000 projects. So that can be a great opportunity. But of course, if you want to use this opportunity, if we want to go forward along these lines, you have to start thinking what are the institutions in your country that are responsible for the promotion, for the management of structural funds. And then at European level, we have to start negotiations with the European Commission so that libraries are given a special focus in 2028 to 2035. Other things that we would like to promote are the recommendations on toolkits, manuals concerning sustainable development goals in and by libraries. And this is, EBLIDA has done a great work on SDGs. We have published 2 reports on sustainable development in European libraries. We have a tool, the EBLIDA matrix. You click on each of the SDGs and you find European projects. And we are launching next month the IPANEMA, which is a tool which not only assigns SDGs to European projects, but also inspires the library for projects and encourages libraries to create partnership from one place to another, from one country to another. Then we want to also, we have published a handbook of e-lending policies in European public libraries. And we want to, of course, to go along this. And finally, we want to implement in an optimal way the Council of Europe recommendation on library legislation and policy, because we say if it has been approved by 47 states and half of them are members of the European Union, so you have just to take this recommendation and include into the European Union work. So I'll come back to the beginning, and the beginning was the Council of Europe recommendation. Thanks to Slovenia, thanks to all the people who have promoted this recommendation. Thank you very much, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Giuseppe, for your presentation. Now we have 5 minutes left for the discussion. Prosim vse, ki imate kakšno vprašanje, da ga postavite kar pogumno. Na voljo bo tudi mikrofon za vprašanja, ki vam bomo ga prinesli, ko se boste oglasili za vašim vprašanjem. Vsi, ki spremljate dogodek preko spleta, kot se rečeno, ste vabljeni, da vaše vprašanje postavite v klepeto oziroma v četu. Pa sprašujem kolegico pri računalniku. Aha, v spletni obliki nimamo vprašanj, tako da na vrsti ste kolegi v dvorani. Vprašanje lahko postavite kar pogumno v slovenščini. Bomo skupaj prevedli potem odgovor in vprašanje. Izvolite, prosim. Giuseppe, you told us so much that we don't have any question, obviously.
And everything is new, and but then
Yes.
I have a question to you. Were you aware that structural funds can be so important for libraries? Exactly. So this is really something that EBLIDA cannot do, because structural funds are negotiated at local and at national level. But you can contact, actually, as Croatia is doing. Croatia has been working now. We are organizing a workshop together, and they have been trying to detect within ministries of culture, ministries of social development, those people who are responsible for structural funds. And perhaps we will have a productive meeting in Dubrovnik.
Question, if I may. You have talked about that you want to hear more from the field, so to speak, so from librarians themselves. So my question here is, what is the best way of us doing that? So giving our needs that are translated into the EU, in the Commission's statements and things like that. So how can we give our feedback in the right way? So not all together at the same time, I'm guessing. So I'm guessing there are some routes that we should follow. And what are especially the information that you're looking for? Because that we can, in a way, form some sort of more active cooperation that is beneficial, of course, to all, not just here's the legislation, you do this, but also you getting the feedback from the field, what is actually happening and what we actually need.
Thank you very much for this question, because this is exactly the issue. The very first thing is to detect whether, for instance, European structural funds are already funding libraries. Sometimes this is done indirectly. You don't know, because in policies for regional development, there may be also activities that are library activities that are funded by this. So the very first thing is to look around and to see what are the projects that are actually funded by the structural funds now. Then the second thing is what are the authorities that are managing structural funds in Slovenia? Of course, there may be, I mean, there is a long list of authorities, and you can find it on the website. I mean, if you type on Google, management authorities, structural funds, you see that there is the long list of European organizations, of national organizations that are in charge of structural funds. And it may be the Ministry of Economics, it may be the Ministry of Regional Development. I don't know, it changes from country to country. In Germany, for instance, you have every land, every region as a management authority for their structural funds. Then, and this is the second, these are the two fundamental steps. Then we'll try to study really whether there are common, then through the Library Association, you send this to EBLIDA, and we'll try to process all this data, and we try to see whether there are common areas which we can promote in the negotiation for the next structural funds round. So these are the three steps. But of course, a framework has to be found. We are only at the beginning.
Thank you, Giuseppe. If we don't have any questions more, we'll discuss it later.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.